I'm super excited because I get to interview you this time. I'm
Yay.
Michelle Tyliakos. I'm a doula here in Vancouver, a birth coach as well. And I get the pleasure to interview Ilka about all the amazing stuff she wants to talk about today. Ilka and I met online, and I'm just so enamored by who you are, Ilka, and your passion for women, your passion for families, and just really getting clear on what's not only just important to you, but what you can see is important to a lot of people in America and around the world. So I'm just really looking forward to what you have to say today. I have these questions written out for you, and yeah.
Thank
Good.
you so much. I can say the same about you. I had so much fun interviewing you a few weeks ago, and we got some really good information out of you. So I'm really excited to continue this conversation.
Awesome. So the first really question I want to ask is what is it and what brought you to do what you're doing, and why are you so passionate about it? And even on the topic of home birth, home birth comes up a lot between you and I. So I just really want to discover how you got into this work and why and where your passions come from.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. I can literally go a long detour for that, but I know we have a lot of things that we want to cover today, so I'm going to keep it short. It starts all with my own birth. Being born as a cesarean, I feel like it took me almost 30 years to kind of heal from that experience. Sounds maybe a little woo-hoo to a lot of people, but I always felt like I kind of was cheated on being birthed the natural way. And my brother 4 years later was a 12-pound baby, and even though he was born in a hospital, he was born the natural way, vaginally, and I always kind of felt like that my mom and my brother had a very close relationship that way. And even though I love my mom and we're very close, there was always that relationship with my brother that was way more intimate. They also, had a breastfeeding relationship, which I didn't have, and was never breastfed. And so I kind of, I kind of had that in the back of my mind, even though I was not a birth worker at all for the longest time, studied business and all kinds of things. And then 10 years ago, got into the birth work through being a yoga teacher and teaching prenatal yoga classes, and then doing prenatal massage and connecting with all these pregnant mamas. And at some point they're like, oh, we want you to be at our birth. And I was like, all right, I don't know anything about birth, so let's get informed about this. And then, I became a doula, and then over the years, attended a whole bunch of births in all kinds of different settings. And then, started studying pre and perinatal psychology and learned more about, physiological birth and the spiritual part of birth, and how all the, how the mother bonding experience is related and very affected by how a baby is being born. And so I looked deeper into that, and I got to really see births happening in all kinds of settings, from, literally dramatizing terrible births in a hospital to nice births in a hospital to, I've attended cesarean sections, and I've attended home births and with a midwife, and home births that were completely unassisted, where I was literally just, a space holder doula. Well, it gives me goosebumps, actually. I might cry today anyway. I'm a little emotional, but so it's just what I saw in all these different birth settings and experiences was that women that got to birth at home just most of the time had a way better experience, and not just externally that they were healthier and happier and had a better bond with their baby and they didn't tear and all of these things, but also their own feeling about it was way more empowered, and it was a really sacred experience. And so I decided, and also I was kind of traumatized from what I saw in hospitals. I literally felt like sometimes women were bullied into interventions and C-sections, and it made me really sad. It felt like I had to witness a rape in front of me and I couldn't do anything about it. Being a doula, I didn't have anything to say, right? There's doctors that would throw me out if I'd get too radical in my approach, right? And so I was like, okay, I think home birth is the better way to go. And so I started doing more research around that topic, and then really got into supporting home birth.
So in that, like, what are you finding that like holds women back from like having amazing birth experiences, like either in the hospital or even on that topic, like home birth? Like, what's holding women back from having really desirable, and, you know, not just satisfactory, but like amazing experiences in birth?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of things, right? And I feel like a lot we covered a few weeks ago when we talked with you. And that is like all the external sources, right, of, you know, lack of support, a lack of having the right care provider, right? Just being in the hospital if you want to have an empowered sacred birth with maybe a doctor that has super high C-section rates is just not a good fit. So often women just choose the wrong care provider. But even though they might have a midwife and birth at home, if they don't have the right mindset, and they have like a fear mindset, I would say, that can hold them back a lot. And often it is also what I see, and what surprises me, honestly, is that a lot of women don't really know about their own body. They don't really know about their own anatomy and about what natural physiological birth is, and what all these different like natural sequences that are so perfectly designed by nature, what they are, right? So I think having that knowledge about what this is all about, not from a medical system taught, or not from a very singular perspective, but from a very holistic perspective, and then being able to truly work through your own fears that come from your own life experience, or that come from, you know, a previous maybe bad or traumatic birth experience, or, you know, abuse, or go through all kinds of things, right, in our life. So if you can work through these things internally in your mindset, and then you can choose the right care provider and have the right support, then that is for sure the best setup.
So just really what I hear then is having the right mindset will help release that fear and help you to make better choises. Is that what you're saying?
Hell fucking yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna swear a little bit.
I said when I was advertising this webinar, I was like, watch out, there might be some swearing. So
yes,
prepared for you, and I love it.
Yeah.
So and I just really want to make sure I cover everything that, like, the questions that I have for you. But in that, like, if people go into, like, women and families are going into birth and they're going in, like, going with the flow, or they just are not informed about the physiological process of birth, like, what do you find happens? Like, what happens?
Well, so I feel like, you know, and we can take this away from birth, right? It's anything that we don't know about, we get easily afraid of, right?
Yeah.
That can be like, whatever. I, for example, a few years ago, I wanted to start learning diving, right? Like, I had no freaking idea what this is all about. So it, like, really freaking scared me, right? Diving at night with just a little torch or something, right? It's like, oh my God, if you don't know what's happening, you're being afraid. And like, I feel a lack of knowledge in general, like, leads to uncertainty, and uncertainty is like an amazing catalyst for fear. So if we know what happens to our body, then we can prepare for that, and we can go into that uncertainty with a sort of trust and faith into the process. But what I see is when women go into that completely unprepared, or, you know, they say, I just trust, you know, an external source like the doctor or the midwife or the doula or the OBGYN, then it's like we're giving away that power that we're actually having as women to carry and create and birth new life, right? It's like, it's so much bigger than this actual event, right? It's like all the feelings that come with it. And if we don't know what's going on, if you're at home with your partner and it's your first baby, and all of a sudden you get these like pains, sensations, intense sensations that you've never had before in your entire life. You're like, holy freaking shit, what the heck is happening to me right now, right?
Yeah.
You have no idea. All of a sudden there's like water coming out of your vagina. Like, what the god, right? Like, you have no idea. So if you don't know that these things are a normal, natural sequence, you can get afraid of it. But if you know, oh, this is my waters releasing, this is my mucus plug releasing, these are my first surges, and they're going to be a little more intense as we're going along, and this is a natural process, and it's not like I'm being run over a truck and my arms being cut off, right? It's not like, oh, we're having this intense sensation or pain, right? I'm very careful with calling it pain because we have such a negative perception to what pain is, right? And working really hard on like changing that perception for women. But if you're having an accident, or you lose a limb, or you hit your head, or whatever it is, right? Like, you feel that intense sensation and you know something isn't right because it's an injury or an accident, or you have a disease or something like that. But birth is just not like that, right? So if we know these feelings are normal, then we don't have to go into it with fear, because fear can then release adrenaline, which adrenaline is a part of birth at a very specific point, the very end of labor. It's needed, right? But if it's being released too early on, it can actually slow down labor, and it can, like, make you contract and close up, like the opposite of what we actually want, of opening up. And then, all these things happening, all these wonderful, like, natural opiates and hormones that help you actually deal with that sensation, they won't come in. And then, women end up begging for epidurals, or they need to be induced or augmented with Pitocin because labor slows down and it needs to be speeded up. And you then ride in that, cascade of interventions, which often ends up in a cesarean.
And I just really hear that, like, when women, in the birthing process are scared and they don't know what's going on, like, they're not prepared because they don't have the foundation of what birth is, they literally close up, like, they're not going to dilate.
Right.
They're going to be scared, and the adrenaline's going to be going, and they're going to have they're just not going to be open to the process.
Exactly. Yeah.
No. So I get it.
It's the opposite of surrender, right? And then we get in our mind about it, which is like, birth is such a, like, physical feeling thing, right? It's not something that we need to get our mind out of the way. And if we're afraid and we're doubting and we're worried and we're starting to think about it, it becomes this cerebral thing, which it's not meant to be. It's literally a complete freaking, like, body feeling that we need to get into.
Yeah. So so in terms of mindset then, like, when you're going into that space, like, what do you feel are the most common fears that women come up against?
Oh man, there's a few. There's a few. And as I said, like, they depend on your personal experience, right? They depend on your personal background. I feel like a lot of women nowadays, especially in America, and that has variations of reasons, deal with anxiety. And so birth is just one more thing that is anxiety inducing. But there's a few things, and I can think of 5, and these were the 5 that we mentioned when we promoted this interview as well, that are pretty common amongst women that consider home birth, right? And the first thing is, I am not able to handle the pain, right? And I think that is the most common one, is that nowadays it's just so promoted by media and, the medical establishment, that birth is this thing that we have to be afraid of because it's so painful and women are suffering. They have to be, like, saved and rescued from this thing, right? But I can actually tell you, like, and I mean, you've probably experienced it in your 4 different birth experiences and all the experience you have as a doula. Like, there are women that can handle it in a very different way. And the difference between women that handle it better and that don't handle it better, and I'm not, dismissing anyone that says like, hell, I had a crazy painful experience, but it's mostly like how the entire setting is set up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you are in an unfamiliar setting, if you are in a hospital where you don't know the people, you don't know the smell, you're being taken out from your home and you have to be transported and driven in a car and all of these things, then your body is being interrupted in its natural sequence, and it's not doing the things that it's actually meant to do. So if you're letting a birth be undisturbed, as nature intended it, then and you go into this whole experience with trust and faith in your body and in the process, then your body knows exactly how to deal with it and creates actually this amazingly powerful cocktail of hormones. There's like natural opiates, there is oxytocin, there's all kinds of things that play into this cocktail that will literally help women to expand. And this is an interesting concept because it's not what we think of, what an epidural does. It actually numbs from the sensation. If we let natural birth be natural, it actually helps women to expand. These natural opiates actually help women to feel more of the sensation, to hold more of the sensation, right?
Love that.
And then we need to have the right mindset to it and not immediately say, oh, this is going to be pain, but have an open mind and a different perception of what the sensation is. And I know a lot of women that actually had very raw and intense, at least what I experienced from the outside, births at home. They said I just don't wanted to use the word pain because it wasn't. It was just something like beyond what I've ever experienced in my life. But it was something very, very intense and different than pain. So
yeah. And Jenny mentions here, she says, I think if you do know what's going on, women can still get scared when faced with the intensity because our culture primes us into fear. Yeah. So it kind of goes on what you're saying here. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. And the thing is, our culture is also like a culture of numbing. Right?
Yeah, totally.
We have so many addictions everywhere. That goes from shopping addiction to working addiction to drug addiction to coffee and alcohol and nicotine. I mean, there's like so much TV addiction. I mean, it's all numbing ourselves from truly experiencing the intensity of life.
Yeah. And feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're getting so wrapped up in our mind that we're not allowing our body anymore to feel. And I think birth is like the epitome of feeling, the epitome of intensity of life.
Yeah, totally. So the pain is something that is a common fear. What else is there? In the fear?
I think one other thing is that women have this, and this is also induced by outside sources, is the emergency C-section, right? What if I'm giving birth at home and I have to have an emergency C-section? And here, please, I make a little disclaimer. I don't want to feel anyone being judged, right? Because that's not what we're doing here. Like any woman that had a C-section in the past or is opting for one, it's your choice, right? I support you. But most of the time, emergency C-sections that are labeled as emergency C-sections are not true emergency C-sections, right? First off, and I think you actually talked about this a lot, is, how this cascade of interventions and all these medications and disruptions of birth actually most of the time lead up to a cesarean. And at the end, they're not true emergencies, right? An emergency would be like, if you're not getting this baby out right now, you're going to die. And I would say that's like probably less than 0.5% C-sections, and we have 33% of C-sections in the U.S.
I was just
average.
looking at, in some hospitals, there's one in Florida, over 60%.
Oh, Jesus, that's crazy. That's so crazy. You can't tell
Just
me that, like,
yeah. You just walk into that hospital and you're going to have a cesarean, 60%.
every second baby is supposed to be born by a surgery. Like that, it just that doesn't sound right to me at all. But so it's most of the time it's not a true real emergency. It is something that, if you would be at home and sometimes women have to be transferred into the hospital. That does happen. I'm not saying that never happens, but it's a very small percentage, and it is most of the time that women still end up having a vaginal birth in the hospital. It was just that they're too exhausted, that they need some IV fluids, or they maybe need a little bit help with getting the baby out or something like this, but they're not really actually ending up in a C-section. And on top of that, and this is something that I feel is really important, if a woman is actually like truly connected to her own body and to the experience and to her baby, and has that like spiritual connection that we actually talked a little bit about before we got on here, she will know very early on if there is something that's something not right. And this is something, if we give away our power to external sources, we also give away that power of knowing what's actually right and wrong with us, right? Because then it's the doctor that decides when a C-section needs to happen or not. And I've definitely experienced moms in the hospital that they were so strong, and the doctor said, like, we got to have a cesarean now. And they're like, no, my baby's completely fine. I checked in with my baby and my baby's fine. It just told me it's fine.
Wow.
And they didn't, and they were perfectly fine. And the doctors were just like, completely put off by that, because that's not what they usually experience, right? A mom speaking up and standing up for her own, experience. And so yeah, that's another thing that I feel like is often just not really true.
And what then about like a fear of like they're having a home birth, and then you hear this story of like, oh, if my baby was born at home, like it would have been a catastrophe. But so what about people who are planning a home birth and they're worried about like medical assistance being needed for baby? Or like they need help breathing or something like that. Like what happens
yeah, actually
how can you prepare yourself, I guess, is really my question.
Yeah. I actually had a really interesting conversation with a mom just a few days ago, and she was telling me that she would like to prepare for a home birth, but she had this kind of traumatic experience with her last birth in the hospital where everything was perfectly fine. And then at the end, the baby came out with the cord wrapped around its neck, and it was purple, and, it was taken away from her right away, and they cut the cord, and the baby had to be like, had oxygen and was in the NICU for a few days. And like, she just doesn't want to have this happen again. And so she really wants to have a home birth, but, she's really afraid that this is going to happen again. And my first thought was that was induced by the situation right there. Because first off, there's a big myth that the cord wrapped around the head is something that like, oh my God, it's going to choke my baby and it's going to take its oxygen away. That's complete bullshit, okay? Your baby's still getting oxygen through the placenta as long as it is connected through the cord. So as long as your baby hasn't taken its first breath, it still gets oxygen through the placenta. That's the first thing. Second thing, most babies come out purple or blue. That's just a truth. And like, if you see any healthy birth and you see the babies coming out, 95% of them are kind of purplish or blue, and they need a little bit of time to perk up. and they need a little bit of time to transition. And actually, in a really great course that I took with Karen Strange about neonatal resuscitation, she talks about that a lot. And she says babies can take up to 10 minutes to transition, especially if they're, they're big babies. They had a long time in the birth canal. They had, maybe big shoulders, and they had to work real hard to get out. They sometimes, it takes them a moment. And the worst thing we can do is to freak out, which they all do in a hospital. I've never seen a doctor or a nurse or even a midwife in the hospital stay calm when a baby comes out, even if the baby comes out perfectly fine. There's always this rush and this moment of scaring, right? Where there's can we have a peaceful moment? The baby just arrived, right? And if the baby is not immediately breathing, don't cut it off the cord. Don't separate it from the baby. Leave it with the mom, gently rub it a little bit, encourage it with the mother's voice to come earthside. You're welcome. We want you here. Come here, little baby, right? And then they all of them, come and transition easily, and they don't have to have this traumatic experience of being cut off the cord, which then obviously, cuts off their oxygen. If you leave moms completely by themselves, they sometimes, if they notice the babies have a little bit harder time of transitioning and pressing this amniotic fluid out of their lungs, they just give the baby a teeny tiny little bit breath, and the fluids can get into the bloodstream, and the baby can actually clear its lungs and take its first breath. So there's no need to freak out at all.
So you're saying then it's kind of over exaggerated in a hospital.
Completely.
And so then that brings that fear into home. Well, if that happens at a hospital, what is it going to look like at home?
Exactly. Okay. And it often only happens because they freak out in the hospital, and it's not necessary to freak out that way.
Yeah. Got it. So then what about you're having this home birth, and we always we don't want an episiotomy, we don't want to tear, we're going to do everything. What do you find that is a common worry for home birth?
Oh my God, yes. And honestly, that was before I got into the whole birthing world, that was my biggest thing. I'm I don't want my vag to be teared open, right? Torn, I think is right. Torn open is the right word.
Yeah.
But
you're totally cracking me up. But yes, I get it.
That was my biggest fear. It's oh my God, how if my boyfriend or husband never wants to have sex with me again, or it's just not gonna work? And it is a big thing if women tear or have an episiotomy, which is the most terrible, intrusive, abusive thing to do, is to have your vagina being cut open with scissors. Okay, that's terrible. But anyway, that's a whole different topic. That is a very common fear because it has such long-term effects on a woman's sexual behavior, pain, her entire pelvic floor recovery, if she's going to leak pee later on, all of these things, right? And doesn't look the same anymore, and all of these things. These are fears that are, how would I say, they're not just uncommon, but they're also, yes, you should be freaking afraid to tear, but you should only be freaking afraid to tear if you are giving birth in a hospital, because most of the time does not happen when you're at home.
And so where do you think then that kind of fear, now I'm just really interested, where does that fear come from then?
Well, the fear comes from because it happens so many times. It happens literally 85% of all women that go to the hospital end up with some sort of intervention, okay? And 75% of all women that give birth in a hospital end up tearing. And that happens because they either are feeling rushed. It's it's pooping out the biggest shit you've ever taken, okay? And you have 5 people sitting in front of you staring at you hospital waiting for you. Well, when is this shit coming out now? When is it coming out? Like, come on, can you push, right? It's like, what the fuck? Like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? It needs to like slowly release and come down.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
women
Yeah.
feel totally rushed. They feel observed. A lot of women have epidurals.
Yeah.
So they are numb in their lower body. So they can't really control that feeling of letting their baby slowly down and out. A lot of them are on their back. So they're in a very uncomfortable position that doesn't really support, the baby coming down the birth canal, but rather being like having to be pushed up, right? So it doesn't make sense. And all of these things just like they lead to women tearing. And I literally, in all the births I've attended in the hospital, most of all women ended up with at least a second degree tear. And I don't think I've ever experienced a woman being, having a tear being in at home. Maybe like one time, and that was like a laceration, first degree tear. And most of the time they heal better if you just let them be, if you air them out, if you make sure you have sitz baths. And here, Chenny says she had 3 home births and never torn. Hell yeah. See, Chenny, here we go. Thank you. Yeah. It's literally just like I've done so much research on that because I really was so afraid of that myself. And all the women that had home births said, I've never torn, even though they had an episiotomy just a year or 2 before with a previous birth. Would you think maybe the incision or maybe the scar tissue would easily tear something? No, it doesn't happen because the vaginal tissue is so flexible and stretchy. It's just like a penis, right? It can go from teeny tiny to really big.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. So it just doesn't happen. If you don't want to tear, just don't go in the freaking hospital.
Well, and I just hear too, there's a lot of just freedom at home birth that you don't see or feel at some hospital births. And I'm not saying every hospital birth, but you're saying a majority, huge chunk, 75%, you're saying things like 85%. It's the freedom to just be, and then you be with your body, you be with your baby, all that sort of stuff. You can actually feel it more, and it allows for more time and literally space to birth your baby without tearing, is what I just really hear you saying.
Hell yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Completely.
So what other thing, is there anything else that is a common fear for families considering home birth, or even all these, we're talking about home birth, but it's maybe they just want a really desirable birth,
right?
And the location is not at home,
right? And I feel like that's absolutely possible. As we said in the interview before with you, you got to be really clear on, you have a good hospital, you have a good birthing center, you have a good provider that really supports your birth choices. But it is also possible if you work through your fears. But yeah, the last thing that I think comes up over and over again, and that's actually happening to myself right now, choosing a home birth, that, not every family member, friend, or partner is on the side, right? And my family, they're what, at home? How can you do that? Why would you? And, being all scary about it. And it's a lot of women, I think, are afraid to not please their family, friends, or partner. And they don't understand that this experience is literally just something, how you say always so nicely, it's not just about having a healthy baby. It's about also the mother feeling empowered in that. And imagine you want the best start for your baby, right? Your baby can only be born once. It's his only birth it has, right? So it's you want to give it the best start. And do you want to have it in a hospital where, things are scary and it's more this mindset of things are going wrong, or you are at home where you can, where the woman is actually the leader of this, and and you can guide this experience, how you want it to be in the space and in the time you want it to be. And just knowing that this is something that literally will influence you and affect you for the rest of your life in a negative way if you have a traumatic or bad experience, and in a very, very positive way if you have the experience that you wanted, right? It'll affect not just your health and your baby's health for the rest of your life. Being born as a cesarean, like, I know that I always had problems with my gut. I always had problems with my bronchitis in my lungs. That is something very known that this happens to C-section babies. And, if you're going to the hospital, that is 1 in 3 chance that you end up like that. Your own health of not tearing, of recovering quickly, of having a, faster birth. And also like that internal feeling of just like, I could do that. I accomplished this. This is mine. Nobody can ever take this away from me, right? So I think it's important to know how important the process of birth is for a woman to be able to stand up for your choices and for your decisions, and to get your partner on your side, and to, educate him and maybe help him through his own fears, right? Like, you're big on this too, right? It's like the partner is so important in supporting you, especially if you want to have a birth outside the hospital, but also inside the hospital or a birthing center or whatever, right? It's just, it's important to have someone that's really truly trusts in you and your capabilities. And if that's not your family and not your friends, then it might be really important to get a like-minded group of people that supports your choices and is on the same path. And there are a lot of women that birth at home. There's actually a whole movement of women that decides to free birth without any medical providers, thousands of them all over the US, because they're so fed up with the medical establishment and the abuse that's happening. And they don't find either enough or the right midwife that supports their choices of having a truly undisturbed birth. So there are enough connections out there, enough support systems out there that you can surround yourself with, and that will empower you in your own choices.
Yeah.
So it's important.
So when do you feel then is the best time, like, to start building all this knowledge and support? And I mean, I feel like it's just common for people to wait till like 28 weeks when they're like, take your birth class at 26 or 28 weeks.
Yeah.
But like, I think you can sense my answer is going to not be 28 weeks, but like your answer, like, when do you feel like women and families should start getting, putting things in place to educate themselves, like, some women just know what they want. They're like, I'm pregnant, I know what I want. And other people are like, I don't know what I want.
I think most people don't know what they want. Yeah.
Yeah. So when's the best time to like start getting it all in place?
I'd say the moment you find out you're pregnant. The moment you find out you're pregnant, I think is the moment where you should tap into wanting to be the healthiest person you can be. And also it's the best time, and I always said that in my yoga classes to women, now is the time where you can actually really truly learn about yourself and your own amazing body. Like, just knowing how your uterus is going to form and grow, and like all the things that it does in your body. I mean, I'm 16 and a half weeks now, and as I said earlier, I have a little bump, and it's just like, it's like the most amazing thing, right? I've never told my body to like, hey, make 4 cells out of 2, and now make 8, and now make 16, and now make like little arms and hands and grow a head and whatever. It's like your body does all these things by itself, and that actually is what's happening in birth too, right? It does all these things by itself. It gets this baby out that it grew, if we just get out of our mind about it. But the earlier you can dive into this, and the earlier you can, like, get the right support system, educate yourself about what is normal physiological birth? What are the designed natural sequences of what's going on in my body, right? And how can I learn to deal with my fears early on? Like I just told you earlier, like I went through some fears like early on, like 8-9 weeks, and like I had to overcome that, and there's still fears coming, right? And they're coming throughout, and I think it's a preparation for us going into motherhood. There will be so many fears that we have to handle and deal with, and it's like it's an important thing to tackle these things as early on. I'd say it's never too late, even if you're 38 weeks and you feel like I have a shitty doctor and I don't really want to be in the hospital. I always felt that was not the right thing for me, but I didn't have the right support. Like, it's not too late. You can still, our mind is very powerful, and you know, as much as we've learned to adapt these fears, we can easily let go of them if we know how to. So it's never too late, but I would say the earlier you can actually inform yourself and start with it, the better, without getting obsessed about it, right? I mean, it's still something that like happens fucking 4.4 times every minute in the US or something. It's like babies popping out like that. I mean, nature knows how to freaking do that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have 7.4 billion people wandering around here. Right? So, what are we making such a big deal of it?
So what do you feel like when like women do birth like at home, or they have their desired birth, or they feel like they've got this and they know how it works and all that sort of stuff? Like, what happens to someone who has all that? And like, what does that look like?
Oh, man. Oh, my goddess, I should rather say.
Oh, my goddess. I love that.
Oh, my goddess. I want to actually print stickers. I want to print stickers that say, oh, my goddess. And I want to put them everywhere.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, so, can you repeat your question? You just said like women that like kind of went into this without fear. Like
they go into it, they've got the knowledge, they have the support, they've addressed their fears, they're choosing home birth or a birth like even in the hospital that's like against the norm, but they're like, I've got this.
Yeah.
What does it look like for them? And like, what are the, repercussions from having an amazing birth? Like, if there's repercussions, like, what does it look like?
Yeah. I mean, you're a really good example for that, right? You told me about all your different birth experiences and how some of them were less empowering and others were way more empowering. But in general, I'd say like it's such a different experience. And don't get me wrong, it's not that every woman that, has a birth at home or has like tackled all her fears all of a sudden has like a super easy peasy 3-hour euphoric orgasmic birth, just popping her baby out, right? I'm not saying that this is the case for everyone, even though I've literally seen that a bunch of times, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm like, I cannot even believe that this is happening. What's this woman doing? Then like other women don't do it. It's kind of crazy, but I'm not saying that's happening for every woman. Birth, I believe, is meant to be an intense, raw experience. I think it is meant to bring us to our boundaries and expand our boundaries of who we are and what we can feel and experience. And I mean, we're creating something that's beyond us. I mean, it's just like mind-blowing to me. But what I see is the difference between a woman having a disempowering or dramatic experience and a woman that has a very empowering and sacred and spiritually connected experience is that it has ripple effects in all parts of her life. It affects her health, it affects her baby's health, affects her health all the way up to menopause. It's not just like, till next month or whatever. No, it's not just how quickly she recovers after birth, which happens so much quicker if a woman is well taken care of, if she has a quicker, easier birth, if she didn't tear, if she has an easy time breastfeeding, which happens so much better if women have a empowering, connected, undisturbed birth, because all these hormones and these natural sequences are being kept as they're meant to be. And breastfeeding is just one more sequence that follows, right? So they have a harder, and as I'm saying this, I'm seeing a mom with a tiny little baby boy going in the swimming pool over there. It's just, oh. Anyway, so women have a different experience in the sense of health of their baby, bonding experience with their baby. As I said, it took me kind of like 30 years to get over being a C-section, not being breastfed, and seeing my brother having all this years later, you know, like kind of sometimes still makes me sad, right? And even though I'm like over it finally, it's like I really want that for my kids as well, and I want that experience for every woman. And I see that like women also have a very like different internal experience of how their birth experience was, how they were made to feel going through this process, right? Were they made to feel like they don't know what they're doing and the doctor had to tell them what to do and they were not in their power and they weren't strong, or they, I don't know, all of these things. Or a mom that like gets out of this and says, fuck yeah, holy shit, I just pushed a freaking baby out of my vagina. Like, I'm a freaking goddess, right? Like, that is like, when I see these moms like having these amazing births and they have their baby in their arm and they're just like euphoric and they say like they've never been higher in their entire life before, and it lasts for weeks. That is what nature wanted us to feel. That's why we have this intense cocktail of all these hormones that, you know, they're really lasting for weeks, and they help not just mama and baby, but everyone around her to bond in a family. And besides all the health and the mental and bonding differences, I feel like what also happens is like women that had a really amazing, empowering experience, they spread this, and this is, again, gives me goosebumps, because they go out and they say, hey, I could do it, you can do it too. You know, it's not something that is like impossible. Like, we are meant to do this. We're meant to be temples of creating life, and you can do it too. And it creates this like positive vibration between women, the sisterhood and the support, and this like uniting and rising of women, right, in their power. And I think that's just so amazing and powerful, and it like literally gives me goosebumps, because it's like so needed too in, you know, in a time and society where women, you know, still often feel suppressed and not heard, and being overpowered and disrespected in a lot of ways, and having that ripple effect going through birthing women and pregnant women and mothers, I believe truly will change our society and will change
totally. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And it's funny because like, as you were saying all that, I'm kind of like imagining the woman who's like, oh, that's great for those people. Like, those women can do it, but I can't do it because blah, blah, blah. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's a lot of people watching this who are like, just feel that that could never happen for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is something that like either you can say to those women right now, or like, how can women who just feel like that's so impossible for them, or they're like considering like, maybe this is possible for me, like, how do they get in touch with you? How do you support people? Like, where can they reach you to have this like fearless birth or home birth that they just see as either maybe they're considering, or they just feel like that is so far beyond them, they like, I can't even see that's possible for me.
Yeah.
Like, how do they reach you and how do you support them?
Yes. First off, yes, it is possible for every woman. It literally is. There are no limitations, and even women that had dramatic, really bad experiences in the past can have really empowering healing experiences another time that actually makes them feel more whole and close the cycle of, you know, of their birth experience. So I would tell any woman that, you know, feels called to, you know, tackle her fear and feel like she wants to have a birth that is empowering and that gives her that feeling and sets her up right for motherhood, to get in touch with me, to, you know, follow my Facebook page. Most of it is public. I keep it that way for a reason. You don't have to be my friend. But just follow me and see what I'm all about, and maybe you like what I'm writing. But I also just created a group called the Liberated Mom Movement, which it's pretty empty still, but it'll be filled very soon with a lot of amazing women and amazing content and amazing information and Facebook Lives and all kinds of good things. So the Liberated Mom Movement is for radical women that, you know, wanted to learn more about how to birth, you know, independently and autonomously outside the medical system, or just, you know, releasing their fear around it. So please join me there. Obviously, it's free. And if you're really serious about, you know, I'm considering a home birth, I'm considering, you know, actually really working on this, and you're willing to really work through your fears, which can sometimes be, you know, we have to go deep. We have to sometimes go back all the way to our own birth. If you're down to do that, then I am very happy to have you on a call with me. I'll take an hour time, and we get through it, and we'll see how we can help you let go of your fear and get you that empowering birth and that sacred experience that you're looking for and that you truly deserve. So it's totally free. You know, there's only me, and I'm traveling around, so there's only a few spots every day that, you know, I'm taking on. But if you're down to really tackle this, and this is something that you want, and you are early on in your pregnancy, or you're in the middle, or at the end, it doesn't really matter. If you want that, I'm here for you, and take advantage of it, and give me a call. It's you know, you can just find a time that works for you. There's a schedule. I can put it in the link. It's called meetme.so/liberated birth.
I put the link there. I put the link on the side. So it is there if people want to book it. And it's like, it's so great that you're just like offering a free hour to like get on a call with people and like really find out.
I learned so much for myself too.
The Liberated Mom Movement on Facebook sounds awesome. So I'm going to join it. I haven't seen that. So I'm going to join that for sure too. So
absolutely.
Really great. Like anything else you want to add? I feel like this has been like such an informative, great hour. I've learned a lot. I'm so grateful. And you're and I didn't even mention, but you're joining us all the way from Thailand. So it is the next day there. I'm yawning, not because I'm not interested, but because it's 10 p.m. here for me. So, you know, I really just like, I really am so grateful just to know you, to like be inspired by you, just all your experience and your knowledge and what you're sharing with the world is just gonna make a huge impact on women literally everywhere. You're in Thailand, I'm in Canada, we're airing this to America. Like it's so great. So any famous last words from you?
Well, thank you so much. I feel the same about you, Michelle. It's such a pleasure to talk with you and to connect with you and to have you as my, you know, friend and guide on this path of, you know, helping to connect and liberate women and set them up for a better life with their families. And, you know, I believe birth belongs to women, and may the fourth be with you all.
Awesome.
Thank you, ladies, for joining us to this great interview. If you enjoyed this, please follow the Liberated Birth Movement on Facebook or subscribe to our channel. If you have more questions how to apply these ideas to your pregnancy and birth, schedule a call and we'll get you clear on what you want and how to get it. meetme.so/liberated birth. meetme.so/liberated birth. Always remember, birth belongs to women.